Okay, there we go. So I want to start from the beginning. This would be a typical winter look to Reynolda, and maybe there's actually a little bit more going on here than in the past. There's some bulbs getting ready to explode, and I'll show you those in a minute. But the first thing you're going to see is you can start to see, like in the right and left corners in the front of the slide, just a few pansies. There's some pansies out there in the middle of the bed, but this is what's going on this year. It may not be easy to tell, but instead of having, say, 6 flats of pansies, we've got 18 flats of pansies. So lots of color going into the winter. Then this past year, looking back, we added, and we're going to add again, between 3,000 and 3,500 bulbs, which is rare for us. There are some bulbs that has been designed into the blue and yellow, pink and white historically by Sears, but there's some photos. There's one in particular, black and white, where in the blue and yellow, this garden, and it would appear before the garden was established, had a bunch of tulips. And so mirroring that photo and being encouraged by John, our new director, like I said, we put in between the blue and yellow, pink and white, between 3,000 and 3,500 bulbs, doing the same this year. And so as you look into this photo, you're seeing tulips starting to come in. Here is a closer shot. And what's going on here, the reason I bring this in closer is instead of just having tulips once, we planted tulips where we could have them staged. We have, on your left corner there, we have the early tulips. Dead center there are your mid tulips, and then up in the top are tulips that would come in late. So it would give us about, from mid-March to mid-April, you would have tulips in bloom. Then after that, you can see here, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but we also put in what's called Dutch iris. And the Dutch iris come in yellow, blue, white, which is great because then I could plant both yellow and blue in the blue and yellow garden. If you look in the picture, you can see the blue ones are on their way out or about spent, but then the yellow ones have just come in. And let me give you this tip. Let me read this to you. I read this on the website from Brent and Becky Bulbs, and they said this, and this happened to me by accident. They said, if you plant a few Dutch iris every couple of weeks in the fall, their bloom time should extend and give you many weeks of fun. And that's what I noticed in this picture. Apparently, I might have planted these a week apart, and the blue ones are about finished, and the yellow ones are coming in. But this is Dutch iris. So when the tulips have finished, here comes in the Dutch iris. Now, looking here, this is the blue and yellow and what we would call it summer glory. We've moved past the spring. All the annuals and perennials are coming in strong, and that shows you what it looks like in the summer. Now, I'm going to point out a few things here. I'm going to bring in a slide here. Right here is let me see if I can point this out. Let's see if I can do this. Right here in this blue, this right here is a carex. We put this in, this carex is called Blue Zinger. I had it in for 2 years and it got 3 times the size I expected. And it took over in essence. So we removed it. If you have an area that's full sun and then part shade, you need a ground cover, something different, say, than Liriope. I recommend a plant like this. But we also then did this. What I did this fall, because I've already made a change, I went. I'm trying to minimize something so here I can read. This fall, I put in a blue grass versus a carex. And so I recommend, if you got a small area or some pots, something like Beyond Blue, Border Blue, or Elijah Blue. Also in this photo is plant right here called Geranium Roxanne or Cranesbill. It's a perennial geranium. It bloomed from late spring to mid-fall. I might even see a few blooms out there right now if I go out, but it carried me through the whole season. We brought it in as a new plant. It's not new. I took care of a perennial border in Old Salem and had it in that border for years. But it comes in blue, purple, pink, and white. So something we recommend. Gives you a lot of color. Zooming in here, what I want to show you here is in the center of this bed is and Hayden referred to this a couple weeks ago, is a marigold called Big Duck. And it's yellow and orange. Obviously, I was trying to I put in yellow. This plant was wonderful. It was 15 inches high, 16 inches wide, 3 inches blooms. And it was like a marigold on steroids. I loved it. Historically, we had a marigold that was more typically like 8 to 10 inches tall, 6 to 12 inches wide, and a little 1-inch bloom. But you can just imagine the difference with a 3-inch bloom. Just as I said, was wonderful. I didn't have to hardly deadhead them, where some of your old-fashioned marigolds you typically have to stay on top of to remove the flowers. Now zooming in here, right here in the center, you see there is a dahlia. And John Rothing encouraged me to plant dahlias one year, and he probably thought I was like a deer in the headlights. Because in Reynolda, two things: there's no dahlias designed in, and in my 30-year career, I had never planted dahlias. So we put in dahlias, and again, I encouraged dahlias. They did wonderfully. One thing you have to keep in mind is when I was doing the research, I saw a lot of large dahlias, and I saw dahlias that needed to be staked. And that was one of my first concerns, was having to stake dahlias. Did a little bit more research and found shorter ones, ones that do not have to be staked, may have a smaller flower, but worked wonderfully for us. And we had them both in the blue and yellow and pink and white. One other thing I learned is, and for me this year, this is trial and error. Last year, I dug them up. I have learned from Michelle Hawks that I work with here, that from the dahlias she puts in her gardens here at work and in another home she takes care of, she does not have to dig them. So I'm going to try to not have to dig and store them this year. That is a lot of work, but I definitely encourage you to add dahlias to your garden, and there are so many options.
Forrest?
Yes, Michelle.
Forrest, before you move on, a question about when you plant your dahlias, do you do anything to the soil?
Okay. We do not here typically, only because our soil has, like in the lower formal about 20 years ago, the lower formal garden was renovated. So the soil I'm working with is really nice and rich and has been well maintained. Obviously, if you're dealing with a situation where you have a lot of clay, you want to get in some topsoil or some compost and get that soil where it is healthy. One thing that you could do if you have problems, I've not had a problem with this with dahlias, but if you have a problem with voles, we have started implementing and adding in a permatil or permatil mix in with our soil now. It is a stone-like product, and voles, it adds drainage, and voles do not like to eat it. So those are the things I would consider when planting dahlias. Otherwise, I put them straight in the ground that we had. I've fed them just as I typically would anything else, but that's all the care that they have needed. So I hope that answers the question. I'm going to introduce you to, well, for some of you, it may not be a new plant. It certainly was to me. This plant is called Cypella, or blue goblet flower. It blooms from midsummer onward and is easy to grow. It has goblet-shaped flowers, as you will see on the right. And they come up on a sturdy stake, kind of airy, have a leaf texture almost like you would see in, say, shape and form, maybe like daylily or maybe more specifically glads. Each flower has 6 petals, 3 large blue ones, blue lavender ones, and 3 small tricolor ones that are yellow and blue. So really interesting flower. Has this teardrop twirl to it before it opens. A beautiful plant, and it just kind of, I had it in my dahlias and my big duck marigolds, and it just kind of surprised us because it just came right up through that with that beautiful color. And it goes on for several months. Another plant that we added new to the blue and yellow is called Cosmia, Waterton yellow. It produces 2-foot tall flowering stalks. Again, a leaf structure like a glad, or even I think I saw it described like a palm leaf type leaf structure. The flowers are 2 inches wide, outward facing, and gold flowers, recurved petals. But you can see that almost like a spray there. Again, it's one of those plants that are in amongst everything else, and then all of a sudden you're surprised by this. I would say midsummer color that just pops through everything else. This was a new plant we put in. I had a volunteer actually give me this. This plant is not designed in the blue and yellow historically, but it is Solidago rugerosa goldenrod fireworks. This is early. It happened to bloom while I was at the beach, so I missed its prime bloom, but this is early, and you can see how it has this spray of like fireworks. It is a plant that will spread. You have to keep that in mind. But as with anything in the blue and yellow, say for example, black-eyed Susans or Rebecca, I have to occasionally divide them up, dig them up, divide them, and either give them away or get rid of them. Well, this is another plant that you'd have to keep that in mind, but it had a beautiful show of color as it weeped. I'm going to zoom in here and show you this. If I can take them, well, I was going to zoom, but you can see where this pointer is. I'm going to take it away, zoom in. Whoops, wrong place. Sorry. Okay, right here in this corner is blue plumbago. This is the annual plumbago. We had always had this in the blue and yellow, at least the last 8 years I've been here. Because I played around with the garden, I took the blue plumbago and started tucking it away into corners like you see here. This was on the left side of a bench, and just started tucking it in. The wonderful thing is it's an annual, so you get it out there, and by May, and I mean up until 1st of October, I had this blue bloom. So so I recommend. It's an old-fashioned go-getter for us, but it works really well. Behind this bench here, I was familiar with what I call hyssop or Agastache Golden Jubilee. It's right behind the bench. It has a gold leaf, a lavender pink like spiked flowers. This is an experiment. I thought this and the euphorbia behind it. The euphorbia is the plant behind there that's got the blue shade to it. I thought both of these would have gotten taller. So I recommend them. Nice thing about the euphorbia, you'll have blue color from the time it starts to show. It's a perennial from the time it starts to show its color in the spring all the way. Even now, I've got some blue on there. It's something I'm going to have to move. Obviously, it did not. There are some euphorbias that can get taller, but this one is shorter. It's actually called, and by its name, I should have known, Euphorbia shorter, a shorty. And so if you're looking for a short euphorbia, give you some blue color, it's called shorty. The hyssop, it is a plant that can get large. It never got large enough for us here behind that bench, but its height is 2 to 3 feet and 1.5 to 2 feet wide. Lovely plant, gives you some great color, even when it's not in flower. It is fragrant when you brush up against it. So I enjoy having that in the garden. Anytime I can have fragrance, even if it's by me pulling a weed and accidentally encouraging the fragrance. Um, Chrysanthemum. This one here is called Gethsemane Moonlight. This one was introduced to us. It will get 2 feet tall, 4 feet wide. It has these bright yellow daisy 3-inch flowers. It is similar in nature to the old-fashioned Sheffield pink. It's one of those ones that is, if you go out on the market now and you buy a lot of mums, a lot of the new mums are bred and they don't always repeat, but this mum will repeat and will spread for, like I said, 4 feet wide, but a lovely mum to consider for your garden. And we added it this year. Just beautiful. I can't say it's, what do I say? It's just a beautiful mum. Switching sides of the garden. This is going into the pink and white garden. At a distance, this is a summer photo. You can see how beautiful it is, how it's filled in. Now we'll come into the seasons and how things look. I show you this photo. This one and the next one are out of order, but the reason being is I want you to see how the pink and white historically might have looked coming out of a winter or even going into the winter. Obviously in this picture, I've pulled the pansies, but again, there were, like in my illustration earlier, where I would have had like maybe 10 flats of pansies. Now we're talking about having 20 flats of pansies. So lots of color going into the winter versus what I typically would have thought of had it doing. I do have in here, a lot of people come into the garden and ask me what this plant is. In the 4 quads, you see this flower blooming pink that's weeping. That is Deutzia rosea carminea. And so if you ever want to have something like that, and it does require some pruning to get that look. Otherwise, it is a shrub, but gives us some beautiful color coming out of the winter. Now, prior to the Deutzia, this is where I'm saying things are out of order. Prior to the Deutzia blooming, this is what this past year looked like and what I anticipate seeing going into this spring. You can see the pansies in there, but you can also see more tulips. There are, if you look close, I can't actually see them in bloom yet. They're not in bloom yet, but hyacinths. So we added pink and white hyacinths to that garden. And then I don't want to fail to mention this because I really had a good year with this plant. A tried and true old faithful I want to get more of was Candy Tuft. It really did me well this year. But you can see how it's more than just pansies, the few traditional bulbs. In this garden, typically all I had by way of bulbs is daffodils, which hopefully moving forward, we will introduce more daffodils, especially to the blue and yellow. The next thing is, in this slide, you will see framing the tea house is white Dutch irises. In 2020, I had Casablanca. This year, I'm adding another one called Alaska. But more than anything, I want to point out the foxglove framing this tea house. There is a historical photo. I don't remember what year, but this tea house was framed by foxglove, and it was just outstanding. It was beautiful. It was even a black and white photo. Well, I wanted to mirror that. So every year we've tried to mirror that photo, and we have, I say last year we had tripled the amount of foxglove. I anticipate doing that again, if not more. I've already started to put them in the ground. But again, that gives that color, and then, like I said, a play off of history. Here's a close-up shot to it. Of the foxglove and how they look. I also like the foxglove in the fact that they look like rockets taking off, if you will, but structurally they play off the tea house. And so I really enjoyed that and recommend that, especially if you need some height and some wonderful color coming out of winter going into early spring. In this photo, you'll see hollyhocks. I do recommend hollyhocks. I've had a struggle with hollyhocks. They are an older plant. It's been in Reynolda, and I really want more of them. The problem I have with hollyhocks is, more than, say, Japanese beetles, is I have a problem with rust. Some ways you can solve that problem, and I give these these tips because we've learned these is Bayer 3-in-1 is a product you might be familiar with. It works. I'm going to be honest here, when I am spraying my roses, I already have a fungicide mixed up in my rose spray. And so I will sneak in and spray the hollyhocks and typically take care of the rust. You can see how here typically by the very end of the hollyhocks, I have a problem with the rust, but I'm usually able to keep it at bay for most of the season. The third solution I'm looking into and I recommend is there are new hollyhocks out there that are not as prone to rust. I would name you a few of them, but I could not find the name or the website I had been referring to. I've still got to look for it again. But I recommend hollyhocks in the garden. They're beautiful.
Hey,
And they come in, yes.
Oh, sorry. Frank's Perennial, he has some of those new ones, so that's a good that's a good source to find some of those new hollyhocks.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and that'll get you
Sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. And that will get all of y'all ahead of the game. Where I start mine from seed. But yeah, certainly visit Frank's.
And there was one more question because I want to.
Yes.
On the bulbs, how long will the tulip bulbs rebloom and stay in bloom?
Okay.
How long do you anticipate your tulip bulbs will rebloom?
Okay, tulips, I'm going to be honest with you, there's two things that are going on. One, we treat tulips typically as an annual. So I'll be honest with you, they are not what I would recommend as a rebloom or a repeater. Some of that is because they've been bred for an instant show and then that's it. Now, on the flip side, because I'm diligent about finding things that come back for me, there are perennial tulips. You have to look hard for them. For example, I know they're in Brent and Becky's, and I say there are perennial tulips because even for about 15 years, I took care of a volunteer's yard that worked with us, and her family was all into bulbs early in her childhood, and she had tulips that did repeat. But you're gonna have to get in the catalogs, do some deep diving, look online, read all their footnotes. But a lot of them you're gonna put in 1 year and take out. I'll just be honest with you. So we treat ours that way, except for the ones I know that are perennial. But most of them we toss out. I know that's disheartening. It's disheartening for me, but don't let that discourage you by any means. This plant here was new to me. It's Orlaia white finch. It gets 24 to 30 inches tall. It kind of sneaks into the garden because what you can sow it just by direct sowing into your garden, and it'll germinate, and you'll forget it's there. You might even think it's a weed, so you might want to keep an eye on where you've put it. But it will come on up, and then all of a sudden, in the summer, here you've got this white lacy flower. And I really did enjoy this plant because I know some of y'all might think I'm crazy when I say this. I like Queen Anne's lace. I love it when I see it blooming in the wild. We may think of it as a wild plant, a weed. We don't, but Orlaia reminded me of that, and I fell in love with this plant. So I encourage you to, it is kind of wild in nature by the way it looks, but don't let that deter you. It was a wonderful plant. Just like I said, I had it planted in some other stuff, so it kind of just snuck up. My phlox hadn't bloomed yet, so there it appeared, and it was really nice. Cleome. This plant is a plant that's been around for a long time. My first introduction to Cleome was 20 years ago. It was in a perennial bed, and I asked the gentleman, I said, what is that over there blooming? And he said, Cleome. He said, and our conversation then came to the point where he recommended I did plant it, and I learned quickly why not. It was everywhere in this perennial bed. And he said, you have to treat it almost like a weed. So for years, I just never had played with Cleome anymore. Michelle had it in some of her gardens, and John Rothling, again, asked me about planting this plant, and I was hesitant, but I put it in, borrowed some seeds, some plants and seeds this year from Michelle, and I'm all for this plant. It has not turned into a weed for me. It could be because I have a lot of other perennials, like in this picture, you can see windflower or anemone, and it may smother the seed and keep it manageable. But if you have a perennial border, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't, you want it in a cottage garden, something like that, just if it becomes a nuisance, you can just pull it like a weed. But Cleome, pink and white, wonderful plant. I'm going to talk about glads. There's two of them pictured here. One of them is called Abyssinian Glad, and the other one is called Volcano. Abyssinian Glads can be hardy in zone 7. They probably are going to have to be mulched. I've only put them in 2 years now, so I'm waiting till next year to see if they will come back for me. But again, I love this plant. It has a peacock orchid-like flower. It is fragrant, so I recommend it. And it's hardy from zone 7 to 10. The other one, Volcano, is not hardy. So if you plant glads, just think about and consider the fact that you may have to treat them as an annual. But there are, like I said, this Abyssinian that's hardy. Another one that I am looking for, so if anyone has it, it's called Carolina Primrose. It's actually a yellow one. I want to introduce it to the blue and yellow garden. I read where it is hardy. So I recommend glads. They are a beautiful addition to the garden. In the next two pictures here, again, are some tried and true plants you're familiar with. You can see Vinca, you can see Dianthus. The plants I really want to point out is Echinacea Coneflower. I highly recommend those. They've been around for years. I actually read there's like 24 different varieties, so a lot to play with. This anywhere from 1 foot to 4 feet tall. The one we have here got about 1 foot tall. And then in the slide to the right is another mum, similar to Sheffield Pink. This one here, we believe is called Cleo's Pink, Chrysanthemum. You can find Cleo's Pink on the market. I actually got this mum by accident. This mum showed up in my blue and yellow garden. And our previous director, Preston Stockton, for years was like, can you get that pink out of the blue and yellow garden? And I left it in there for about 3 years, probably shouldn't have. But it was a lovely pink. So I finally was able to grow it, move it out, and move it into the pink and white garden. And I recommend this mum. And here's a close-up shot of it. And you can, if you like pink, and like I said, this was a winner for me. And it's pink daisy light with a yellow center, beautiful color, and has served me wonderfully. You can find the same plant called Cleo's Pink, because we've got both. This was a new plant introduced to me. Plant Delights is probably in Raleigh's doing some breeding of this plant, and they've come up with some different colors. I have written about this. You can find some more information about it in our Cultivate newsletter. But this plant is called Zephyranthes, or Zephyr Lily, or Rain Lily. And the reason for it being called Rain Lily, it blooms after a rain. But I've also found that with irrigation, I can get this plant to bloom. So as long as it gets a water source that it thinks is rain, it blooms. It comes up with these fireworks-like blossoms before they open. They come in white, pink, and yellow. And here I'll show you some other slides where they start to flower. You can see there the flowers are open, and yet there's still some buds that look like these fireworks just in slow motion get ready to show their glory. And then here's a white one, and there also is a yellow one we had in the blue and yellow. But look for the only source I've seen. Well, I will back up. Farmstead had some for sale 1 year here locally in town, but Plant Delights is working on some more colors of that. This last plant I've been waiting on. Sometimes you just have to be patient as a gardener. This plant came to us from tissue culture. So you can just imagine they were small plugs, probably like 2 inches tall. But this is a white giant calla lily. At first I was like, what am I going to do with this? But the more I learned about it, because it gets large, in our garden, we're surrounded by boxwoods, as many of you may know. And so I thought, what a beautiful forefront to our boxwoods. And so I've got some planted behind a bench right in front of the boxwoods. And slowly but surely, this plant is getting its height. It has this white, large cup-like flower. This particular one has a speckled leaf, as it were. And I'm anticipating by this year, I will have these at 4 feet, and they will really frame our garden. So I'm looking forward to that. But if you got and you need it, like I said, they can possibly get 6 feet tall. But if you have a space that's large and you want something different, some color, something to put against a backdrop, say, like I said, boxwoods, that is a wonderful plant. Now, are there any questions?
If anyone has a question, you can unmute yourself. But there is one question for us. What was the name of the yellow mum at the beginning? Or kind of in the beginning?
It is called Gethsemane Moonlight. Like the Garden of Gethsemane, it's Gethsemane Moonlight.
I see. Is there a list of these plants available, Forrest? Can you email these to people?
Yes,
or
I can. I don't have a list, but I can certainly get a list really easy together. Let's see, the best way, if you want to, my email address.
I put your email in there for them.
Oh, did you? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, if y'all want to email me, I can get you that list compiled rather quickly and get that out to you. I'd be more than happy to do that.
And let's see, what was the other? Let's see, where do you get most of your plants, and where do you get most of your plants?
Well, I mentioned Plant Delights. They're a good resource. Farmstead sets up seasonally on the corner of Peace Haven and Country Club. I recommend them. Mitchell's north of town is a good source. I think King or Mount Airy, but just north of Winston. Some other places you could check around town, Myers off of Stratford Road or 158. And then we do a lot of stuff from seeds. Bulbs, like I said, I mentioned Brent and Becky's, and then seeds. I get my seeds from like Parks, Grimes, Johnny's, places like that. So,
do we sell any of these, Forrest, like at our plant sale?
That I have to think about. But I want to say no. It doesn't mean we're not looking into that. Yeah, I'm trying to. No, I'll be honest with you. Most of the plants I named, we don't typically sell. We may sell some variation of, like for example, we have sold Echinacea, so I know that one shows up. But like mums, we got out of selling mums because there's such a competitive market for that. Don't mean we won't. I would love to grow some of these and sell them, but no, we've not gotten to where, like for example, the Zephyr Lily. We have a few of those, but we haven't carried them for sale yet.
Okay. Beth, do you have a question? Go ahead.
I was going to comment that, you might consider those mums, selling them, because those aren't usually available, that
Yes.
Those perennial mums are not readily available. And
they are hard to come by.
They're just so satisfactory in the garden.
Yeah.
And Michelle, before we leave, if you have time, could you repeat those prices on the holiday sale?
Yes, I will. Yeah. Oh, no, you're fine. Yes, I will. And Forrest, there's another question on the Elijah bluegrass. How long have you had it? Because when they had it in Brevard, it was very invasive.
Okay, I have not had is Amy there?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just went from the carex to the grass this year, so I don't have an answer as to how invasive that is. I don't know. I'm certainly, if I find out they are, it's like kind of like the carex. After about 3 years, I removed the carex. So yeah, if you find things are invasive, do because I did read where some of the grasses will seed off, so you may have to manage that. But I've learned to manage a lot of things, just like I had the illustration where I have to manage black-eyed Susans. Well, there's a lot of plants I end up managing, but certainly if you find out they're a pest in the beginning, maybe consider not planting them. But yeah, I don't know about those grasses. Sorry.
Are most of these deer resistant for us? The plants that you have talked about, are they deer resistant?
Oh, let me think about that one.
Well, while you're thinking, I'm going to answer some of his question. We have deer awful here in the gardens, especially up in the vegetable garden. And so what I do, because none of those plants are really deer resistant, even the rosemary sometimes, is I spray liquid fence. It's an organic spray, and you can get it at Ace, Lowe's. It's cheaper if you buy it online through their company. But so that's to answer your question about what we do with the deer. But now forest plants, are they deer resistant?
I cannot specifically answer to all those plants, so I wouldn't even want to try. Certainly do your investigation. But like she said, spraying for the deer is the biggest thing. I have more problems with deer here eating roses. So to address each individual plant, I couldn't tell you. Sorry.
Yeah, but sometimes if you, I tell one of my clients that if you plant rosemary or mint in with your perennials and stuff, the deer seem to not nibble on it as much. And if you plant mint, put it in a pot, don't put it in the ground. So any other questions before I got one more little announcement? Any other questions? If you haven't had a chance to come to the gardens lately, do come. There is a lot going on, like Forrest said. And the lower garden, in my 24 years here, this spring, it was the best I have ever seen it. Forrest putting in all of those bulbs, and even the dahlias that his head exploded a little bit because of it. And the Cleome, you can't go wrong with the Cleome. But do come out and look and just see the changes and stuff. Forrest has put in a lot of, I won't say tears, but a lot of hard work, putting it together and stuff. I do want to remind people, because I know some of y'all came in a little late, that we are still having our holiday plant sale. So it will start tomorrow, and we'll have our amaryllis, our poinsettias, paperwhite, cyclamen. I think he's going to have a few lemon trees and some other tropical, I don't know, I can't remember. But the prices, Beth, on the poinsettias are $8, $12.26. The paperwhites are $10. The cyclamen are $8.15. The amaryllis are $20 and $25. If that answers your question. So.
Yes, thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome. I hope to see you out here and get you some holiday plants. Any other questions before we head on out? Well, if y'all do have any more questions, if you think, I put Forrest's email in the chat box. So if you have any questions, you can email him. So, Forrest, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you.